Deafrowe with Deafrowe TV here, and I'm back again with another review. And this week's movie is going to be The Lair of the White Worm, 1988. But before I get started on this review, please remember to hit that like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell if you want to see more of my videos that I put out every week. Now let's get started on this review of The Lair of the White Worm, 1988, starring a very young Hugh Grant and Peter Capaldi. And I mean, I don't know if this is one of their major first movies, but it's fairly when they were getting started. And I have to say it, I like both of them in this movie. And then of course you got Amanda Donahue playing the main bad guy in this movie, Lady Sylvia Marsh. Catherine Otzenberg playing Eve Trent. Sammy Davis playing Mary Trent. And then you got the police officer Paul Brook playing the police officer PC Ernie. And then Stratford Johns playing Peter, which is like the butler for Hugh Grant's character, Lord James D'Ampton. And then, of course, you have Peter Capaldi playing Angus Flint, the Scottish, uh, I guess, archaeologist in this movie. So let's get started on this movie. This very Dracula monster esque movie. You can almost even say it's a little bit of a creature feature towards the end. So we start off with Peter Capaldi finding this wonderful skeleton, or skull, I should say, of something that looks like a dragon slash snake, white worm, whatever you want to call it. It goes along with the local legend of a white worm that was killed by one of the Lord D'Amptons in the past. And Capaldi comes across a temple that was buried underneath the bed and breakfast that is run by Mary and Eve Trent, which he is currently staying at because, well, where else are you going to stay in the area? If you are doing an archaeologist and you want to dig for bones in the area. But he finds out this is like a little temple area where this bone is buried. And it was buried here by a certain sect of Romans who were in the area at the time. Crazy stuff. And of course, there is Sammy Davis playing Mary Trent right here. And you can tell from the very get go, she's got a little bit of a crush on the Scotsman here, Peter Capaldi. I mean, or in this case, Angus Flint. And she's making fun of him, basically, finding all this stuff in here. It's like, this can't be real. This is not, she just doesn't believe what he's finding. And, trying to poke fun at him or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, he's going to clean up the skull and everything, take it inside. And as he's talking to Mary here, she's telling him, like, hey, we're going to go to a party tonight, so there's not going to be dinner made at the bread and breakfast. So you either come to the party or you don't eat anything. So he doesn't have much of a choice but to take her to the party. And of course, I think that's was the whole idea because she's, sweet on him pretty much. And that's the whole point is to get him out, have fun with him. So then they go to the party, and of course, you have this band here playing the whole song about the legend of the White Worm. And this is at Lord James D'Ampton's castle, I guess you could say. And the character's played by a very young Hugh Grant. Let's see here. Right here, Hugh Grant is talking with Peter Capaldi about the whole idea of the white worm and all this other stuff, and how his ancestor had slayed the white worm, and that's why the castle is in the area that it's in, and the temple where he is, digging up the stuff on the bones and stuff like that is an area that his ancestors had buried on purpose. So yeah, so he's going into the whole legend with Angus on this whole thing, and Angus is not buying a lot of the stuff. He's like, "It can't be what this is. It can't be what I'm finding over there. All this stuff." But he goes on to explain in very good detail exactly what the white worm is. This worm is a spelling that is really meant to like take the place of dragon or whatever. It's worm spelled WYRM would imply a dragon, and then yeah. So he's like, you don't take the word worm literally. It probably means some form of a dragon in this sense. So he's explaining all that to him, and then on the way back, they're headed back to the bed and breakfast, and Mary, with the escort of Angus, they see a car driving through the woods and everything without any headlights on, and it scares the crap out of her because her parents at this moment are missing, and they went missing in this area, and they still have not been able to find them or anything. And that's when the police officer shows up and shows Mary that this pocket watch that they found in a cave nearby, and it turns out to be Mary's father's pocket watch. So, in search of them, they decide that the next day they're going to go up to those same caves and look for Mary's father and mother who've been missing. So, yeah, that's what's going on about. Anyway, so then the officer on the way back to the police station, he stops by a Temple house because he sees that there's something going on there. He thinks somebody's breaking in. And while he's there, hide behind a tree trying to monitor the area, he gets bitten by a snake. Winky dink. And of course, that's when the lady Sylvia Marsh just happens to show up at that exact moment and be like, "Hey, you want to come in?" Whatever. Anyway, so she pretends to like take care of his wound, his snake bite or whatever, by getting the poison out and everything. And I think at the same time she's inserting her own poison and is turning into something else. The next morning, she knows that they're going to go looking for the mother and father, so she makes her way to the bed and breakfast where Angus has been unearthing stuff, and she sneaks into the house. Yeah, she sneaks into the house and then takes the skull with her. And on the way out, she just spits this venom stuff onto the cross because she's an immortal vampire, worm thingy, snake thingy that can spit venom. Anyway, so she spits it on the cross or whatever, and then heads on her way out. And then at that moment, Eve and Lord James Dampton show up after Lady Sylvia Marsh kind of slipped out, got away with the skull or whatever, and Lord Dampton has come there to look at the skull because he's curious to what Angus has found or whatever. But when they get there, they see the note in the pocket watch and all this stuff, and Eve starts having like a little mini meltdown. And then something happens when Eve's going upstairs. She sees the cross, and she's that something's on it, and she's like wondering what that is. And then she touches it right here, and then has these weird flashbacks of like a different time, and almost like she's living a like seeing a past life that she might have lived or whatever as a nun or something like that. And yeah, all kinds of strange things. She has these weird visions, and it pretty much almost breaks her. And Lord Dampton is trying to sit there and console her, but she's having these weird ass visions or whatever. Yeah, all this weird stuff going on. So then finally, Angus and Mary show up, and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing in my room? We were looking for that skull that you found." And that's when Angus figures out, like, "Oh shit, my skull's been stolen. Somebody's taken the." And of course, Lady Sylvia Marsh is headed back to the house, and she picks up a Boy Scout or whatever, some type of Boy Scout, and whatever they have over in England. Takes him home, and of course, seduces him and all that kind of stuff, and then bites him and kills him in the hot tub. And of course, she's got the skull there, and she was gonna use him as a sacrifice, but then somebody showed up at the door, and she's like, "Well, I'm doing you a favor," and she just ducks his head underwater because right now he's paralyzed from the bite that she gave him. And so she's like, "Well, in other words, I'm doing you a favor. I'm not gonna sacrifice. I'm just gonna let you die right now, and then drowning while you're whatever." And who should show up at the door but Laura James Dampton himself, played by Hugh Grant, and he's there. He's like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, who are you? I'm your neighbor, whatever." And he's trying to be a nice neighbor. He's like, "I'm gonna send my people around, cut the grass and stuff, and get these snakes out of your yard." And of course, she gives this whole thing about how she's afraid of snakes and all this other BS, and then and Dampton's not buying any of it really. He's just like trying to figure out who she really is exactly, and why she's there, and why she's doing the things she's doing. And of course, she's trying her best to seduce him and lure him away from critical thinking, pretty much. And at the end, she gives him a little kiss at the end, almost like it's like she's trying to poison his mind just enough to keep him away. And that's what happens. So he goes home, and then he goes to bed, and he starts having this weird ass dream where he's like getting on a plane, and then like Mary and Eve are like stewardess on the plane along with Lady Sylvia Marsh, and then like he's trying to figure out which stewardess he's supposed to go to or whatever. It's so weird, and why it's called comedy horror and not just straight up horror. It's got some weird shit like this in here. It's so yeah, like Lady Sylvia Marsh is trying to seduce him in his dream as much as she was in real life. And of course, the pen obviously is supposed to reckon up, be seen as something. Anyway, in his dream, he ends up in that cave where the white worm probably is. And the next day, he wakes up and he sees this in the news that they called off the search at the cave. And he realizes the cave looks just like the one in the painting where it shows his ancestor decapitating the white worm, which is right. I can get a good shot of it here. Try to get a good shot of the actual. And it should be right in here somewhere. If I get there's a dream. Okay, right in here somewhere you'll be able to see the photo of. If I can get the painting just right. There it is. So yeah, there's the photo right there of his ancestor pretty much decapitating the white worm. And like I said, he wakes up the next day and he sees that exact cave in the news where they were been searching for Mary's mom and dad. And he starts to put two and two together. It's like something's up here. This isn't coincidence. And so he decides, he's going to gather them up. He wants to go up to the cave and check everything out for himself, and so that's what they do. And of course, they're not really having anything to do with it. Mary, Eve, and Angus, they're not believing what James is saying about the white worm and all this other stuff. They just don't want to believe it, or But James is convinced that something is going on, and that's the whole reason that he's going up there is to see. He wants to see if the cave is somehow connected to Temple Castle or Temple, wherever that's the name of the place that Lady Sylvia Marsh is staying at is Temple House. I think is what it's called, and it's obviously why it's called Temple House because it's built over a temple to the White Worm, apparently. Which is they didn't really know it was built over a temple to the White Worm or whatever. Anyway, so now like Eve and Mary don't want to have much to do about it, so Eve decides she's just going to take her go back to the house while the other three stay behind and look through the cave one more time. And Eve doesn't really want much to do with it. Well, on the way back, Eve is caught by none other than Lady Sylvia Marsh pretending to be stuck up in a tree. It's so dumb. But Eve helps her down and like hypnotizes her, like Dracula would somebody would entice somebody to the house or whatever. She hypnotizes her and puts her in a trance to lead her back to the house. And pardon me if I have to skip through this pretty quick because there are some R-rated scenes in here. So if you see me skipping through it real quick, that is the reason why. So anyway, yeah, Temple House. She gets her to follow her to Temple House. And the whole reason is she wants to use her as a sacrifice to the White Worm because she is supposedly, a virgin. And the White Worm only wants virgins as sacrifices. So she proves that she's a virgin. And then, yeah, as you can see where that's going. So she proves that she's a virgin, and then she gets her to call Mary at the bread and breakfast and tell her like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to London. I'm gonna, take a break from everything because I'm so stressed out with mom and dad being missing and all these searches and all these things about the White Worm and all this other stuff." She's like, "I'm just gonna take a break and go to London." I mean, it's not very convincing. So, yeah. But then something happens as she's on the phone. She sees the like cross. She has a ring on her finger that looks like a crucifix, and she sees it on her finger, and it takes her out of a trance just long enough to scream over the phone, and that's when they're all three sitting at the house wondering where she's been all this time, and then they get the call, and Mary's not believing what she's saying, so Mary calls the railway station to see if she's there. She's not there, so obviously somebody has taken her. So now they're figuring out that something's up with Lady Sylvia Marsh, and they're starting to actually believe James and what he's been saying about the White Worm and the trances and all this other stuff. So now they got to figure out what to do. So yeah, she figures out. Yeah, that's where they figure out Eve is not really missing; she was taken. And then James is back at his castle, or whatever, and he's going through his father's stuff, and he's got the speakers up on top of the castle, or whatever, to so he can so the neighbors can hear it. Basically, Lady Sylvia can hear it and maybe mess with her a little bit. Because one thing that you find out throughout the movie is certain music has a trance, puts these snakes or whatever, these vampiric snakes into a trance. And and that's the whole reason he's trying to find something that he could use on his record player to blare across the loudspeakers to his neighbor and get her to come out of the house. And he finds something that's similar to like like somebody that a snake charmer music type thing, and then he puts that on the record player, and he gets Lady Sylvia to come out, and that's when, as you can see here, Angus and Mary get into Lady Sylvia's house, and that's where Angus realizes nobody has a statue of this Roman guy here, and I can't remember the guy's name. But yeah, so she is lured out of the house, her castle, whatever. They get in, And he tries to explain to Mary nobody has a statue of this Roman guy because he was like a rebel or a renegade general of the Roman Empire that went off and did his own thing, and he had a lot to do with the White Worm thing. And Lady Sylvia even lets it slip earlier in the movie that that was her husband. So she's thousands of years old and all this other stuff for obvious reasons. So yeah, so Mary goes into this one room in the castle and she finds her mom, who's been missing this whole time, this whole movie, and she's just sitting there watching a video of like snake dancers or whatever, all these people playing with snakes. And yeah, so she goes in there. She's like, "Mom, I found you," or whatever. And then like the mom is like not the mom really anymore. She's a fully transformed uh snake, vampiric snake thingy, whatever you want to call them. And basically, let's see if I can get a good shot of it. So yeah, she goes over there to her mom, and then her mom's like, "Hey, look, I found mom." And then yeah, it doesn't work out like she thinks. And of course, the mom is like turned into this vampire looking snake creature thing, and she bites Mary. And Angus, doing the best he can, he tries to suck all the poison out of the bite before it takes hold in her bloodstream. And Angus is able to save Mary before she succumbs to the poison and becomes one of those creatures, basically. So that's the one cool thing I like about this versus like a purely vampiric movie. In this movie, the vampiric they bite like vampires and they will do the blood and everything like vampires, but they also insert a poison that makes you become just like them, that vampiric snake. But just like any poison that you get from a snake, if you can suck out the poison in time, it won't take root in your bloodstream as fast, or at least you have time to seek medical attention before you die or turn into one of those creatures. But if you don't, you die, you turn into one of those creatures, you're done for. You are a vampiric snake thingy. Anyway, we cut back to Dampton's. I keep saying wanting to say Dampton. It's Dampton. They go back to his castle and he's trying to put together sorts of things, and that's when the electricity goes off because apparently Lady Sylvia has turned the electricity off because the music is drawing too many people out. So then, it's a cool scene here. Yeah, the mother had made her way over to Dampton's place or whatever. Let's see. Yeah, right about here. So the mother had snuck into Dampton's castle, whatever, and she was trying to sneak up on him. And next thing you know, he's like, "Oh crap, get the sword!" And as soon as he gets the sword, yeah, yeah, she's running. It's a cool scene, by the way. I love this scene. Cuts her in half, but she's still alive because you didn't cut the head off, man. So yeah, she took out the butler below on her way in, killed him, and then now he's there by himself trying to figure out what to do next. And then, of course, Mary and Angus are back at the bed and breakfast. He saved her life. And now that Angus and Mary fully believe what Lord Dampton has been saying this whole time, Angus is like, let me do some research. I can figure this out. And Lord James Dampton is like, do what you got to do, man. We want to take this thing out. And so, yeah. Yeah, there's the mom there. After she's been cut in half, she's still like wiggling around and shit. So yeah, so you see where she got bit from the day before, but she's still alive. She hasn't turned into one of those creatures because Angus got all the poison out before it could take hold. Well, the next day, the next morning or whatever, she sees the police officer come up to the house. He's like, yeah, we're going to go up to uh, Lord Dampton's place and take a look at the scene of the crime where your mother is and all this other stuff. And as she gets in the car, he changes the story a little bit. It's like, no, we got to go to Lady Sylvia's house first and pick her up because I got to take her statement or whatever of events. And then she realizes something's up when she gets there, and she starts to run away from the police officer because she realizes he's been bit and he's been turned into one of those vampire things right there. As you can see, he has completely turned into one of her vampiric minions, vampiric snake minions, whatever you want to call it. And that's when Angus shows up again to save the day, and now he's got bagpipes, and he's using the bagpipes to keep the snakes kind of like in a woozy state, in a hypnotic state, trying to ward them off. Anyway, so then he goes around the house doing the same thing. Lady Sylvia's temple house do the same thing, and finally he pulls out a syringe, and it's supposed to be like some anti venom for snake bites. He gives himself that shot, and then lets himself get caught by her. I just had to skip through that pretty quick. So you see Angus there at the bottom of the screen. He's been bit on the leg and brought down to the caves, which connect to the other caves that they were. This is the caves under Temple House, which connect to the caves over there at the where they were doing the search for mom and dad. So that's how the snake or the white worm, whatever you want to call it, was had attacked the parents and brought them into this cave under a Temple House or whatever. And now Eve is to be sacrificed. And of course, Angus, and this is where Lord Dampton, he's at the caves right now, and he's brought up these canisters of almost like a ginormous smoke machine that he wants to set up on the cave end and push it through the crevice and see where it comes out at. And he's pretty sure it's going to come out at Temple House. But that's where Dampton is. But the police officer had told everybody that they arrested Dampton and he was in the jail cell, but that didn't happen. That was all a farce to get the police officer off his back for a minute so he could do this. So yeah, Diana, which is the name of the white worm, and she's fixing to sacrifice. There's the white worm coming, and she's taking the ropes off and fixing to drop her down in there. And of course, Angus wakes up in time because he supposedly took that anti venom, and he's starting to come back around, and he fighting it off pretty much. And he's able to get up and cut her free, and then send what's her face down into the pit with the worm. Saves her, and basically he was able to like push Lady Sylvia into the white worm's mouth, and ended up being she's the sacrifice of the day. He saves the girl Eve, gets her out of there, and he goes back as you see. There's the white worm here. Pretty cool effect. That's the reason I said this could be a little bit of a creature feature if you think about it, the way this is set up. Anyway, it'd be even cooler if you got to see the thing actually move around in the caves and stuff rather than just have a head sticking up out of a hole. But it's 1988. You get what you can get. Still pretty cool in my opinion. Anyway, so we get to the so Angus at the very end he throws like a hand grenade down the throat of the worm here. You can see here. He's like, I'm gonna go back and finish this off. And so yeah, he gets he's somehow he's got everything he could think of possibly in that little purse. I mean that in that kilt of his. He pulls out of the hand grenade of all things. Let's see if I can find that spot. There you go. Yeah, he pulls out the hand grenade like See ya. It blows the shit out of the worm. Anyway, and that's the end of that pretty much. Everybody shows back up at the bed and breakfast, and Angus is like, "Where were you when we needed you?" So I was pushing the smoke from the other end. It was that smoke kind of helped us a little bit because it screwed up the lady Sylvia's timing on everything because she thought something was happening, like something was on fire or whatever, and she decided she was gonna go ahead with the sacrifice. And so yeah, he said, for what it's worth, the smoke did kind of help us, get out of there, and it helped me save Eve and get Mary out and all this other stuff. They're sitting there having a little bit of scotch and celebrating, winning and all this stuff, and you get talking about all that, and yeah, he tells him here that he never went to prison, or he never let the cop really do anything to him. He kind of skipped out, and Angus is sitting there like just kind of listening to everything, and then he goes inside. He's like, "Hey man, you want to go down and have a drink or whatever?" And then Angus goes inside and he picks up the phone, and it's a scientist lady. And the scientist lady is telling him there's been a screw up when he came in to get the anti venom. He ended up taking the ended up getting a vial for arthritis or something like that, and he really didn't take any anti venom like he thought he did, and it was kind of a lab screw up or some sort. And then Angus is like, "Oh crap!" So Angus is freaking out. He's like looking at himself in the mirror, checking his teeth and everything like that. He doesn't see any. They don't show anything right here or anything. Anyway, so they both get in the car and head on to the pub or whatever. And Angus is starting to act a little bit weird here. And then that's when he goes to shift the car, tells him, "I'm hungry. We're going to get something to eat at the pub or whatever. We're going to have something. I don't know about you, but I'm hungry." And he's staying for a bite. And then he's like, "Yeah." And he he's like, "Why not?" And then like he goes to shift. And then shifts is like, "Oh no." And he's like, "Dun dun dun." End of the movie. And of course, it ends with that same music, that same song that you saw towards the beginning of the movie. That it ends with that song playing at the end here. So yeah, there you go, right there. All your characters in a row. Awesome movie in my opinion. 1988 at its best. Very stylized movie, especially when you see the the flashbacks, the hallucinations and that kind of stuff. The stuff that that Venom ends up making people having these hallucinations of past events or whatever. Those scenes are very like weirdo, like trippy. That's the point of it anyway. But still, that's where most of the boobage is in this movie too. So be aware. If I had to give this movie a rating, yeah, I had to give it a solid 3 stars. I mean, almost mainly because I mean, there's such good actors. Hugh Grant, Peter Capaldi are very good actors. So you buy a lot of the stuff that they're selling in this movie because they're really that good of an actor. So uh, really makes this a great movie is having those two guys in there playing these characters, and then this Amanda Donahue playing Lady Sylvia Mars is a perfect villain, and she's very vampiric in her appearance and the way she moves, and then she does like all the snaky like movements and flowing and all that kind of stuff. Perfect. So yeah, I give this. I mean, this is a very entertaining movie. It's not the best movie ever made or anything like horror comedy, but I give it a solid 3 stars. I'll watch it over and over again. I have watched it over and over again. So yeah, that's my review. And I'm Deafrowe, and I'm out.